Welcome, everyone, this evening to this exciting conference and webinar that we are happy to host with the John Paul II Center for Interreligious Dialogue and the Centro Pro Unione. It's a long collaboration that we have had both with the John Paul II Institute as well as the Russell Berry Foundation, who has made all of this possible for us, as well as the course at the Angelicum in Interreligious Dialogue. This evening, we are very happy to welcome in our midst again, no stranger, Professor Menachem LORBERBAUM from Jerusalem and a senior fellow at the Hartman Institute, a lecturer in the program here in Rome, and certainly in the seminar that takes place every year at the Hartman Institute. Professor LORBERBAUM will speak to us this evening on the ethics of law in Judaism, and he is also very well versed not only in contemporary issues, but also, as we'll find out, in historical issues. So without further ado, we welcome you, Professor Menachem, for this webinar this evening. Shalom and benvenuti.
Thank you so much, Father Puglisi. It's a pleasure to be here. As I mentioned, this is the first time actually in 10 years that I haven't been to Rome. We studied together by Zoom, or the equivalent of Zoom, and for the past couple of weeks, which is truly wonderful. I'm so thrilled to see that Sister Catherine is with us, and that Professor Afterman is with us, and so many of our students. I can see that my daughter is here too, so I'm happy to welcome her. And it's truly a pleasure to speak with you all. You might know that it's the eve of the Passover holiday, and I'm already past checking the house for the remnants of leavened bread, and we begin our festival on Saturday night. And so it's truly a blessed moment to speak to you all. Now, the subject of my lecture this evening, the ethics of law in Judaism, tallies with the main themes that we dealt with in our study together this year, around questions of narrative and nomos in the Bible. What we did, and this is by way of introduction to what I want to speak about, is that we tried to track the interplay between the narrativic elements of the Bible, most especially of the Torah, of the Pentateuch, and the other main genre of the Pentateuchal writings, which is that of now we spoke about it, that the term Torah in Hebrew, although it can be also translated as law, carries also the primary meaning of teaching. And this blend of teaching and normative and norm is really crucial to understanding the centrality of the Pentateuch in Jewish life and Jewish religiosity. And one of the things that we try to look at is to try to understand how the narrative genres of the Bible guide us in reflecting upon the meaning of law, the legitimacy of law, and how the narrative guides us to understand that norms are only part of an entire web, of an entire texture that creates a human being standing before God. And it's this interplay that we try to better understand in the course of our study during the year. All this leads us to a very specific focal point, the one that I want to look at this evening, and that's understanding the role of the Decalogue in the formation of the Torah. Now, the Decalogue, as we all know, appears twice, and it appears both in the book of Exodus and Exodus 20. It also appears in Deuteronomy 5 in a slightly different version. And the main question that I want to attend to is what is the specific role of the Decalogue? What is being separated out here in a certain way? What are we being called to give our attention to? Why is this the heart of revelation? These are the kind of questions I would like to deal with. Now, I think that unraveling this issue of the particular role of the Decalogue is not only an important key to understanding Judaism, it's crucial for understanding the foundations of Christianity as well. For what is the Sermon on the Mount but a revisiting of this foundational moment at Sinai? So this is a moment that is formative for both of our traditions and really what holds them together as mirroring each other, as reflecting each other in a profound dialogical manner in what both Judaism and Christianity perceive in their different ways as being essential to the very history of human salvation. So this is a crucial issue for us. It's key to self-understanding and also to the deeper meanings of interreligious dialogue and the kind of meanings that accrue through this kind of important dialogical event. Let us now return to think about the role of the Decalogue. In order to do this, we should also think about the different normative structures within the Torah itself. Well, we all know that the book of Leviticus includes two major big units of law. The law of the cult, which informs the first 16 chapters of the book, and then from there on, the book of holiness. Then we have the book of Deuteronomy, which in itself is a unique combination of nomos and narrative. We have the law of Deuteronomy as a book of covenant is encapsulated within the Mosaic, within the great Mosaic Testament before his parting and his death on Mount Nebo. And then we also have the important unit of the Book of Covenant that we have in the book of Exodus from chapters 22, 23, 24, very rich chapters of law. Now, when we look at this, we can ask ourselves, well, why is this particular unit standing out, and why is it framed in a very specific way? Because let us remember that the Decalogue is really the heart of the revelatory moment at Sinai. These are the divine words. Yes, and God speaks all these words and says, "Vaydaber Elohim" in Hebrew, "Et kol hadvarim ha'ele lemor," all these words as follows: "I am the Lord your God," etc., etc. And I think that we all know the Ten Commandments, so I won't repeat them verbatim right now. That's the heart of the revelation. Interestingly, in the Jewish tradition, the revelation at Sinai, the theophany at Sinai, is termed the giving of the Torah. This is the moment of the great moment of divine grace where God bequeaths his teaching to his people. And although it is termed the giving of the Torah, actually, when we look more carefully at what happens in Exodus, then one of the things that comes directly to mind is that the bulk of the law, the breakdown into particular and detailed norms, is actually not given to the people directly at Sinai, but is given to Moses later on. Remember that God says to him, and come up to the Lord. Ken Vel Moshe Amar, and to Moses he said, Alel Adonai, come up to the Lord. Vetna lecha shama et luchot ha'even, and I will give unto you there the tablets of stone, HaTorah ve'amitzvah, the teaching and the commandment that I have written to teach them. And so Moses goes up to the mountain and is given a detailed Torah, which he will then later on give to the people. And then the question returns: if the bulk of the teaching is actually given to Moses, what is the relation between the two elements? Why is this first? Why is this second? Why do we consider in our tradition the moment at Sinai as the moment of the giving of the Torah, when it seems that the bulk of the Torah is actually given elsewhere? So this is a very troubling question, and leads us to the need to understand what it is that God is imparting to the people at in the great declaration of the Decalogue. So this is actually the detailed question that we're interested in this evening, and I will try to give an account of this. Now, some commentators have argued interestingly, that one way of treating the Ten Commandments is to see that the Ten Commandments are really a general presentation of the law, and the relation between the Decalogue and the details to come in the actual Book of Covenant given to Moses is a relation between a generality and details. Now, this is an interesting track, but very difficult to support when you look at it on a one-to-one basis. It doesn't seem that many of the commandments that are within the Decalogue are actually reflected in detail in the Book of Covenant. On the contrary, also, or in the other direction, many of the laws in the Book of Covenant do not seem to be directly connected in any important way to that which is appears in the Decalogue. Certainly, the relation is not between a general assumption and a derivative detail. This is certainly not the relationship, although there is some kind of elaboration. So although this track is an important track that has been picked up in the tradition and in the different commentaries, I think that it doesn't seem to capture an essential connection. So we have to go elsewhere. And I think that the way to think about it is to understand slightly differently the role of the Decalogue. That is to say as follows. It is true that the book of the Covenant, that is chapters 22 and 23 in Exodus, are definitely a detailed system of norms. And they cover many, many different areas. of human life. However, the task of the Decalogue is different, and not only that. Listen, when you look at the book of at the Decalogue, there are no sanctions. There are blessings, yes. Respect your father and your mother, so that your days shall be prolonged by God, right? And then there's also the wrath of God upon who takes his name for vain. But what is it that holds together this unit? What makes it special? I want to argue that we have to make a distinction between norms and what I'll call normativity. What is normativity? Normativity are the conditions that make us worthy of being the subjects of law, of being worthy of being the subjects of divine law, those that will receive this blessing from God and will be expected to live up to it. What makes a person worthy of Torah? The Decalogue is about that. It's about, when I use the word normativity, the conditions, what conditions a person to be able to accept law, to be a subject of law, is in terms of its content, the underlying ethics of law. It's this ethical sensitivity that is meant to inform not only the law as a whole, but also the manner in which one performs law, the manner in which one takes Torah upon oneself. That it has to be done from an ethical point of view. And the unique ethic of Torah is what's developed in the Decalogue. It's what makes us worthy of being the addressees of revelation. It's what makes us worthy of assuming the task of the law in the world. And it's this combination that's really what's so special about the Decalogue. And I think when we look at it that way, we also understand its inner structure. Because when we look at the Decalogue, what we can see is that it's divided into two different halves. Traditionally, within Jewish law, we distinguish between laws or commandments that are between a person and the divine, and commandments that deal with the relationship between a person and other persons and other human beings. When we look at it that way, it seems that the Decalogue neatly divides into 5 and 5. And their interrelation is also an interesting mirror of each other. Just like we understand that there is that there's no that the Lord is one, and we are commanded not to worship anything else as a deity. So too, on the human level, we are commanded not to kill. We are commanded not to steal. So there's an interesting reflection between them, and this reflection in itself both echoes other moments within the Torah and is echoed by other moments. Let me give 2 examples. First of all, I think that here we, in terms of what the Decalogue reflects, I think it's an ethical reflection of what the meaning of human beings being created in the image of the divine is all about. What it means is that the kind of respect that we are expected to show to the divine is to be reflected in the respect we show to other human beings. That is, this mutuality is reflected in this double structure of 5 and 5 within the Decalogue. So the Decalogue is understood on this reading that I propose as a realization and a manifestation of human beings being in the divine image. It's first and foremost an ethical understanding of what this means. Secondly, it's also reflected in its own ways in other strata of the Torah itself. When we turn, for example, to the Book of Holiness, we see that the Book of Holiness begins in Leviticus by telling us that that we should be holy because God is holy. Kadoshim to you in Hebrew, you should be holy, you shall be holy. Ki kadosh ani, for I am holy, Adonai Elohechem, the Lord your God. And then the text continues. What does this mean? This means that a person should fear his elders. What does this mean? That a person should leave the gleanings in his field for the needy. So what we have here then is a very interesting thing, because to the degree that it is true that the Decalogue reflects the ethical meaning or the profounder dimension of what it means to be created in the divine image, then we understand that the crucial moment or the deeper moment of revelation at Sinai is not, as it were, some kind of heteronomous command coming from a transcendent fiery above to human beings, but rather an explication of the deeper meanings of what it means to be created in the divine image. And this places an inner claim upon us. The moral claim is a claim upon us as human beings from the very fact that we are created in the image of God. So we are tasked by this fact. It is not primarily a prerogative, it is a demand. But it is a demand that grows out of the very stature of what it means to be a human being. And this is crucial, because what this means is that to the degree that the Decalogue is a reflection of the ethics of being created in the divine image, then this is a claim that's not only a claim upon Israel, it's a claim upon every human being. In the Torah, what the Book of Covenant does is that it translates this ethical expectation as a tasking for creating a worthy society. And what does it mean to create a worthy society? For example, that the first thing we see is that being in a human society means that we live under the economy. We live within an economy. And the meaning of living in an economy is that the economy and the market turn human beings into slaves. So the first issue that we chance upon in the book of Covenant, in Exodus 22, is that human beings cannot be owned by other human beings. That slaves are not really slaves; they are laborers, and therefore, on the seventh year, they have to go to their sabbatical. This profoundly reflects also the commandment of the Sabbath. Remember what the meaning of the commandment of the Sabbath is. What it says there is that you have to, first of all, not only not do labor, but the entire household cannot do labor. The owner of the household is commanded to be responsible for the rest and the time off of his entire family and all his workforce, everyone. Remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it, etc. And you, your wife, your slave, your maidservant, your animals, everyone has to have their time off on the Sabbath day. And this is later reflected in a different way, as we said, within the commandment on slavery. The Torah in Exodus 22 does not recognize slavery as it turns it into an institution of labor. The owner, the master, does not own the body of the person that works for him. And this is a wonderful example. Is the biblical legislation with regard to slavery sufficient? The answer is no. It's not where we would like it to be, but it has inspired us to change the world in which we live. And in that respect, we have to remember that the giving of the law does not mean that the world is already redeemed. What it means is that we are called to participate in its ongoing process of redemption. And the Torah charts the way of the beginning. But what animates it, what keeps it alive, what makes it vital is this ethical center that's at the Decalogue. And therefore, we are constantly called to reclaim this center point, to constantly keep it in front of our eyes and ask, are we living up to the way it ought to be? Now, this is, I think, a crucial question also with regard to many of the norms of many of our normative systems. We grow up within systems that often we say that it takes us many years to understand that something in them is deeply wrong. But where are we to call upon the vital ethical forces that will enable us to stand up to these norms and say, no, something's wrong in them. The crucial role of the revelatory moment at Sinai is that God says that this is our compass. This is our compass. It's our compass in how we understand the law, how we interpret it, and how we realize it, and how we further it with regard to the telos of making this world a better place. And the way of doing that has to be constantly informed by the very heart of sanctity. The heart of sanctity means realizing that we are in the image of God. To be within the image of God means that we have to respect the fact that we are a reflection. And we have to treat this with the greatest of dignity, with the greatest of sensitivity. It's this kind of consciousness that is being inspired, and that is why it's so crucial that it's be the divine word. The revelatory word would be at this moment. It empowers the claim of the ethical within us. I think that this is what the giving of the Torah is about. And if I return to what I begin with, and with this I'll finish, is I began by saying that we are on the eve of Passover here in Jerusalem, in the Jewish world. We've cleaned our houses. We're ready to reenact the moment of redemption, the moment of Exodus from Egypt. And many teachers have pointed out that the Hebrew name for Egypt, Mitzrayim, carries within it, in terms of Hebrew, in its Hebrew, it means the sense of being in a strait, mitzal, in a very straight, a very narrow place. And these narrow moments in our lives when we feel we're suffocating, we can't breathe anymore, and we are yearning for liberty, for freedom. But this is only one moment. Freedom from slavery is one moment. It's the first moment. It's the necessary condition for the second moment, which is taking our stature as being in the divine image into our own hands. Taking it into our own hands by assuming responsibility for the moral claim upon us. That's when the moment of liberty becomes a moment of dignity. And therefore, within our tradition, really what we begin in Passover is the path of 50 days to the Pentecost, which in the tradition is also the moment of the giving of the Torah, that is, of the Ten Commandments. So we begin by this moment of renewal, of reenacting the liberty from the slavery, from the original slavery in Egypt, from the slavery in our lives, from everything we are slaves to, and coming to being worthy of the human stature, of being a human being, of a full human life, of assuming the ethical responsibility of what it means to be a human being. So thank you very much, and I'll pass it on now, I think, to Father James, who I think will field the questions, or should I field the questions?
Yes, Menachem, we had agreed that you would see the questions as they come in and answer them. Also, people have a chance to turn on their microphone and do so as well.
Whoever wants to ask, let yourself raise your hand. Oh, Sister Catherine, I didn't see your hand. So you go first. Go ahead.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I had my earphones in, so I had my microphone on, but I still have the earphones in. Now, Professor LORBERBAUM, I would like to just make a comment, something that struck me. Something that struck me was earlier when you were speaking of the normativity and what makes us worthy to be subjects of the divine law. I found that concept rather interesting, because it's as if, what makes me worthy of the Torah? As you say, it's not that even though I'm in the image of God, there's still another step, in a sense, that you're speaking of, whereby I almost recognize, or I come to a full recognition of what that Torah means. As I say, it was just striking, I think, the way you spoke of this, as this condition, that there's this first condition, and later you explained it more as to the slavery, but I'm referring earlier when you're just saying of being worthy of the Torah. So it's not as much a question as just a comment, but if you'd like to comment on it, I'd be happy to hear more.
Thank you so much, Sister Catherine, for alluding to it, because that's really, it's really, that's for me the heart of the matter. The rest was sort of an elaboration of it, because I think when we first of all, we understand that law is never sufficient unto itself. It's not sufficient in two important ways. One way is that all law needs interpretation. It needs a contextualization, and that's one of the important functions of the narrative structure of the Torah, is to give that depth dimension. But the second is that any tool, Sister Catherine, is only as good as the human being who uses it. And therefore, if we don't have a sufficiently robust development of the character of whoever it is that bears the law, then we have we lose all ethical control upon it, and in fact, all religious control about it, insofar as we understand what religion is about, is giving sense and structure to the manner in which we stand before God. So it's this aspect that I called normativity, and I think that here also we see the place where the two different meanings of Torah meet each other. Torah is law and Torah is teaching, because the teaching is the teaching of the way of God, and the way of God, I think, is captured most powerfully in the Decalogue. Was that helpful?
No, very much so, because I'm thinking as you were speaking earlier, and as you're speaking now, I'm making comparisons, of course, even with the Christian understanding. I teach justice, so I teach a great deal about law and about virtue and about how the Ten Commandments. So that's why I'm very interested even in this understanding and deepening the understanding, because the Jewish understanding of that law, which so much forms also the Christian understanding.
Right. I'll take it even a step forward. It really, looking at it from the angle you've come, of course, I'm using the concept of normativity pretty much as a sociologist would use it. And I'm asking, what are the conditions for making law possible at all? However, the way I'm applying this sociological line of thought is in terms of theological ethics. So, and here I think that we have the profound power of the Torah, because if we look at our different polities in which we live, of course they have a vision of what it means to be what civic virtue is about. However, the claims of civic virtue are often not strong enough to inform and to structure positive law. And this is one of the deepest quandaries of our polities that we grew up in. So it's actually in direct relation to your concerns that I'm that you raised, that I'm actually thinking out these thoughts.
Thank you very much, Professor LORBERBAUM. I would love to continue, but I'll stop and because I would like to come back with some later. We can have a longer dialogue, but I'll let some others come in for the question. But I want to thank you for your talk this evening.
Thank you.
If I may ask, Ben, I just had a question. Actually, at some point, you were starting from this idea of the manifestation of human being in divine's image, and then you quoted from you shall be holy, for I'm holy. So I just wanted to know if you can expand a little bit more on the question of holiness, because it's really, I mean, maybe there are some other addition to the idea itself of holiness. I don't know if you can share some thoughts on this precise topic.
Thank you, Elena, for that question. Now, of course, there are different visions of the meaning of holiness and sanctity in the Bible, and the Hebrew word kadosh is used in so many different ways within the Bible. But we might even say, let's begin by saying that this very root word kadosh is really the arena for so much of biblical thought about what encountering the divine in the world can possibly mean. When we look at Leviticus 18 at the beginning of the Book of Holiness, we see a pitch for understanding holiness in a very specific way. And here, of course, I'm following the work of my colleague and friend who has also taught for many years in this program, Professor Israel Knoll, whose wonderful work on the Book of Holiness has really been an eye-opener for us all. And one of the things he pointed out is that First of all, when we look at the first verse of chapter 18, you shall be holy, the second verse, you shall be holy because I am holy, the Lord your God. We see a fascinating notion of mutuality with regard to sanctity. So what I suggested is that we understand this as raising to a higher power of the very complementary relationship that we see in kernel in the notion of being in the divine image. And then this is continues to be developed in this wonderful opening sentence. Every person shall fear his mother and father and keep my Sabbath, for I am the Lord your God. Now, this is an explication of what it means to be. What is the consciousness of holiness according to the book of holiness in Leviticus? What it is a consciousness of a unique combination between the ethical and the ritual that are somehow interwoven in a way that that means that we that the way we walk in the world has to be in a consciousness of standing before God. Now, this has two sides to it. One side is this consciousness, but the other side is understanding that we are walking in the world. So the tension between the mundane and the otherness of divinity is held together here in this unique notion of sanctity. So in this way, it's for example something very different than the way, for example, Rudolf Otto will pick up on other notions of holiness in the Bible. For example, thinking about Isaiah 6, for example, or other important texts. Was this helpful, Alina?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, that's really enlightening. I mean, there's can be being between ethical and ritual, but also this idea of really of mutuality, like because this is related to us. You shall be holy, but then because I am holy. So that's really interesting to hear this reading. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Hi, Prof. Is Emmanuel.
Hi, Emmanuel. Go ahead.
I've had terrible internet connection anyway. I want to ask a more contemporary question, taking it a little bit away from Judaism. Okay. Now, we know Israel, today's Israel, is officially a Jew state. And we also know that it is equally secular in practice. So I'd like to know to what extent the principles of Judaism in terms of the legal and ethical principles of Judaism have influenced the laws of Israel today. Can we objectively claim that there is a relation between the laws as they are today and the principles or the laws drawn from the Bible and from the rabbinic schools?
This is a fascinating question, Emmanuel. Let me state that I think that there are different kinds of tensions, and I have a lot what to say about it. But I will say that even though the state of Israel sees itself as a secular nation state, it includes within its book of laws a basic law, which is called the Basic Law of the Sources of Law. And this law states that the court can make recourse to traditional Jewish law in order to fill lacunae within the law itself. So this is really the classic instantiation of this, and this is probably, formally speaking, in terms of the structure of law, this is probably the most important thing. But then, beyond that, really I think the most relevant way in which you hear the Jewish tradition echoing in Israel is in the ongoing argument within the Jewish parts of Israeli society about what does this tradition entail? What is its claim upon us? Is it a claim of claims of purity? Are it claims of holiness or claims of justice? Do these different claims coincide with each other? Are they mutually exclusive? Are they detrimental to notions of human liberty, or do they foster notions of human liberty and dignity? These are the kind of questions that are actually deeply contested and debated within Israeli society, namely of what would be, what kind of vision of what a worthy society and a good society is entailed by this tradition. So I think that Emmanuel, where you see the classic Jewish tradition alive in Israel today, in the state of Israel today, is not particularly in how particular norms are realized, but in the very fact that the question of what this tradition entails in terms of the good life is heatedly contested among the Jewish part of the Jewish citizens of the State of Israel.
Thank you very much, Professor Menachem LORBERBAUM. I don't know if there's any other question before we end our session today. If there's any last question, just unmute yourself, and we'll take one last. Let me see if someone is. Okay, so please join me in thanking Professor Menachem LORBERBAUM for really this thoughtful and inspiring lecture, and that was really a nice, I think, way of approaching both Pesach and Easter. There's actually I would say a thought that I will keep particularly of all this lecture with me while we're approaching these two important religious festivals for our traditions. At some point you said that law inspires to change the world we live in, and that the world is not already redeemed, but we are called to participate in this process of redemption. And I think it's really a call for all of us. While we focus on the important time that is laying ahead of us. So once again, thank you all of you for having been with us tonight on behalf of the John Paul II Center for Interreligious Dialogue and the Centro Pro Unione. And first of all, thank you, Professor Menachem LORBERBAUM, for having shared with us your wisdom. Also at this late hour of of the evening, and let me wish you all Pesach Sameach and happy Easter. And it was a pleasure to have you all with us.
Thank you all so much. Arrivederci.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.